There's a mistake almost every bar owner makes, and it's a mistake I made many times. And that is that we hire based on experience and fire based on attitude. And the thing is, the math on that almost never works out. Technical skills takes weeks to train, but the ability to make a stranger feel at home in 30 seconds, that's something you either have or you don't. Welcome to the Bar Business Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. And if you're tired of figuring out every bar problem alone, well, join Bar Business Nation, our free Facebook group for bar owners who want better ideas and real conversations. The link's in the show notes. Today on the Bar Business Podcast, we are diving into why experience-first hiring is failing you, what you should actually screen for, and how to build an interview process that finds it, how to train technical skills fast once you have the right person in the door. It's the steps that are actually required to build a solid team versus making the same mistake we all make, which is trying to build a team that someone else trained, that knows someone else's processes. And here's the thing we always have to remember. If you hire somebody with 5 years of bar experience, they might know their way around a POS. They might be able to make every cocktail on your menu. Now, conversely, they might make it the way they made it at the last 5 bars, which isn't the way you want them to make it, and that's a whole different thing that you have to train out. But more often than not, 3-4 months later, these folks are gone, or worse, they're still there, but they never really adapted to your culture. They're poisoning your staff. And meanwhile, the person who you hired 2 years ago, who had no clue what they were doing in this industry, who worked their way up, but has a magnetic personality, that person has regulars asking for them by name every single day. So I think for all of us, we know through our own experience that when we have the wrong employee, something has to be done. But what we don't always know is, how do we hire that person? How do we identify the right replacement for the problem that we have? And it tells you almost nothing when you just look at experience. You have to look at, how does that employee, how does that team member make my guests feel? Because that is the single variable that is actually going to impact your revenue. So to start off our conversation today, I want to really hone in here on why experience is the wrong primary filter. And this is a mistake we all make. I like experience, you like experience, right? It's great to bring somebody on and be like, yeah, they know how to use my POS system. Yeah, they know how to make basic cocktails. But the thing is, experience only tells you, unless you've seen this person work and know them, experience only tells you that they've done the job before. Doesn't tell you how well they did it. Doesn't tell you why they didn't. Doesn't tell you if they cared about the fact that they did it. Honestly, it just tells you that they did it. And a lot of times those folks come with bad habits. Could be bad habits on how they were trained by their old manager. It could be bad habits that they made themselves. It could be a bad attitude, a jaded attitude that's been ingrained in them over years of being abused as a bartender. These things happen. But it's harder to get rid of 5 years of bad habits than to develop someone with no experience and genuine curiosity. The traits that are actually going to drive your revenue are warmth, presence, the ability to read a room, the ability to react to guests, the ability to form emotional connections with those guests, to remember their names, to care. And none of that shows up on someone's resume. None of that shows up in their work experience. I think we all know that service is the #1 driver of an unforgettable guest experience. More than the food, more than the drinks, more than the atmosphere, more than anything else. Service is what keeps your guests coming in time and time again. So unless we get this part right, we're not going to do as well as we can. And the best culture bars aren't staffed necessarily by the most experienced people. They're staffed by people that genuinely like other people. They're staffed by people that care. Now, those bars also provide the opportunity for those folks to get experience, right? They create pipelines where, yeah, okay, you don't have experience, but you love people. Come in as a bar back, then move up to a bartender, or come in as a server, then move to a bartender, then move to a manager. You create pipelines, you create ways for employees to grow and develop, but you hire based not on experience, but on attitude, on how well that person fits into your culture. So what do we actually need to hire for? And let's get a little bit more specific here. Warmth. Is this a warm person? And I think we all intrinsically know you can look at somebody and oftentimes you go, well, that person's kind of cold. That person seems like a really nice, warm, friendly person. But what do you look for in an interview that's going to dictate, or at least allow you to predict, whether or not this person is more likely than not warm in their approach towards other people. Well, you look for things like, do they make eye contact? Did they smile first? Did they make you feel comfortable before they knew they were being evaluated? How are they coming across? Do they feel genuine? Or do they feel like they're putting on a show? Now, in hospitality, we're always putting on a bit of a show. But if you can't do that and seem genuine or actually genuinely be genuine, which is by far the better place to be, then you're never going to actually connect with people. You're going to have this surface level that maybe gets people a little bit of the way, but real connection takes genuine warmth. The second thing you should be looking for in all your interviews, are these folks curious? Do they ask questions about the bar, the regulars, the concept? Do they ask about who they're going to be working with? Do they ask about your expectations? But most importantly, do they ask about the people? Because unless they're genuinely curious, unless this person is looking to grow, to develop, to learn, to understand, it's going to be really hard to train them. The third thing we want to look for is resilience. If you ask them about a hard time they've had at work before or a job that didn't work out, are they going towards ownership or are they going towards blame? Do they say, well, it wasn't really a good fit, and part of that's on me? Or even just, it wasn't really a good fit. My personality didn't correspond properly. Or do they say, my last boss was an asshole? Because chances are, if their last boss was an asshole, you're going to be an asshole too. It's really that simple. But a lot of this comes down to, are they able to admit to their own failing? Do they show that resilience? The fourth thing I want you to look for is energy management. Can they sustain genuine engagement through a 6-hour rush? Not just the first hour. Now, that's hard to judge. But if they're currently working somewhere else, you can always go and watch them. You can always go see how they're doing. Now, but this is also energy management. That's something you're going to have to find out kind of in that first 90 days, in that probationary period of employment, where you're testing things out. You're making sure that everybody's a good fit. And the fifth thing I want you to look for, and this definitely comes in that 90-day kind of probationary period, are they coachable? How fast do they improve when giving direct feedback? What is the biggest predictor of long-term performance? The biggest predictor of long-term performance is their ability to adapt, to adjust, to improve. And unless you're seeing that out of your team members, especially the new ones, like I said, during that first 90 days, they probably aren't a good fit. If you ask someone to adapt and they give you excuses, that's not going to be helpful for you and that's not going to be good for your overall culture. So what are some things we can do in our interview that kind of give us some predictability on this energy management and coachability piece? How do we interview for the unteachable stuff? Well, standard interviews are more or less useless. You're going to get rehearsed answers. So there are a few things you can do there. You can ask questions that are off the wall. My favorite interview question, literally my favorite interview question: a duckbill platypus and an armadillo get in a fight. Who wins and why? It's a nonsensical question. I don't know that a duckbill platypus and an armadillo have ever been in the same room, but it's not about those animals. It's not about if you even know what they are. It's about, I just put you in a very uncomfortable, very weird situation, and how are you going to react? You can't give a rehearsed answer to that because no one's ever asked someone that before in an interview. It's a critical thinking question. It exposes reaction under pressure. It exposes how they think. There is no wrong or right answer. Matter of fact, what their answer is after I ask a question like that is completely irrelevant. I have also been known to ask the question in an interview: you win the lottery, you get $1 million. What are you doing with it? And there is no right or wrong answer there, but that tells me a lot about your values and how you think. And again, it's not a standard question that people are going to have rehearsed answers for. Now, I will say the one right or wrong part about that is if you're not saying I have to save 40% to pay taxes, I'm going to wonder about how much taxes you've paid in your life. And, I'm a finance guy. I care about taxes. But that is a non-standard interview question that can illuminate a lot about a person. Another thing that works very well, that's a little bit more traditional and not quite as off the wall as I can be sometimes, is to put them in a situation. Have them go talk to a regular. Watch the interaction. Watch how they deal with coming into the bar and what they're doing. One thing that I like to do sometimes, especially if you have cameras, have them come into the bar for an interview, be back in the office, watch the cameras. How do they come in? What do they do before you're actually there to talk to them? Do they seem nervous? Do they seem relaxed? Do they seem bored? Or if they talk to people, how does that interaction go? And then there are some questions we can ask that actually reveal character about how they've worked in the past. A little bit non standard, but more on the standard interview question side. Tell me about a shift that went completely sideways. What happened and what did you do? Here we're getting an idea of how they deal with stress, how they deal with recovery of difficult situations. Another question we could ask: what's the best bar you've ever been a guest in and what made it that way? Or what was your best dining experience anywhere, bar or restaurant? This is going to tell us what matters to them, how they interpret good service, what they think the best really is. And another question I really like that's going to tell us about their character: tell me about a time a customer is wrong and how you handled it. We're listening there for you knew they were wrong. Did you just give in to what they said wrong? Did you push back to the point where you were an asshole, or were you somewhere in the middle, which is where we frankly want to be? So it's a really good indicator of how are they going to deal with my guests? Am I guess going to like the way they get treated or not? Now, through all these questions, through all the interview, we want to listen for specificity. Are they giving specific examples, or are they talking broad generalities? Or are they taking ownership? Are they saying, yes, I did this and I screwed up? And when I screwed up, this is how I got out of it. Or this is how I recovered from it. Got out of it's probably a bad phrasing. This is how I recovered from it. This is what I did to make that situation right. Do they seem to have genuine or performed enthusiasm, performed interest in the job? And most importantly, how do they talk about their former coworkers, their former boss? We've all been in jobs that are not a good fit, but it's one thing to say, and I've said this before about working into it, I'm not a good corporate employee. I'm just not. I don't do well in corporations. That doesn't mean I'm a bad employee overall. That doesn't mean that Intuit's a bad employer. But let me be real honest. I kind of despise middle managers. I kind of always despise middle managers. I hate office politics. It's all too opaque and weird for me, and I'd rather just get down to the frickin' brass tacks and do the damn job. Now, that's not to say, again, that I'm a bad employer, that Intuit's a bad employer. But it is to say that I don't do well in corporate. I've worked for corporations 3 times in my life, and every time it's ended poorly. I shouldn't say poorly. Every time it's ended mutually, because neither party was particularly happy with what was going on. That is just a fact. So, are they willing to say, I'm not great at this and this wasn't a good fit? Or are they going to say, these people screwed me? Everything there was wrong. I can't believe how incompetent they were. Because anything that's negative is really going to be a problem. And then there's one get check question you should ask yourself at the end of every interview. Would you sit at a bar with this person and talk to him for an hour? If you wouldn't, probably your guests aren't going to want to sit there and talk to him for an hour either. If you would, probably a great hire. So now let's talk about, we hire somebody, we hire based on attitude. We haven't hired based on technical skills. So what do we do to bring up those technical skills? Well, if you want some great information on training, go back and listen to prior episodes. We've done a number on this, but I do want to recap this. Most technical bar skills can be taught to a motivated person in 2 to 4 weeks. Now, I believe training programs should be multiple years long because there's all sorts of product knowledge. There's all sorts of detailed information, history that can enhance an experience when your bartender, when your team understands those things. But the technical bar skills, that this is how we make a margarita, this is how we make a daiquiri, this is how we make a paloma, this is what this is what that is. You can do that in a couple. Now, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you know my favorite, absolute favorite training protocol is tell, show, do, review. Tell someone how to do it, show them how it's done, have them do it, and then review it. Tell, show, do, review. There's a whole podcast episode on that. You can go back and listen to that. One other thing that I think is very important in a training regimen is shadow shifts before solo shifts. You want to pair this person with their best cultural fit, not your most senior person. And that's an important thing to understand. In this industry, you will have multiple people in your organization that are a little different from one another. They'll all fit into your overall culture, but maybe they're not the same people. I mean, it's like in high school, the jocks and the emo kids, 2 different groups of people. And maybe the jocks and the emo kids, they hang out together sometimes, right? They get along. They're in the same classes. They talk to one another, but 2 very different cultural standpoints. You have that in a bar as well. So when you're bringing somebody in, if you're bringing in an emo kid, pair them up with the emo kids. Don't put them with the jocks. That's just not going to work for anybody. The other thing that's really important here is that you need written standards. You need training guides, you need employee manuals, you need all of this. If it's not written down, it's ambiguous. If it's ambiguous, I can't hold an employee to it. So you need to have your SOPs in place, you need to have your training in place, you need to have everything written down so that you have unambiguous standards that you can hold people accountable to. Here's the other big thing about training, and this is something that we really need to be better about in this industry. I've talked a lot about how you need to have ongoing one on ones with your employees. With a new employee for that first 90 days, I think you should have a one on one every week or two. Now, it sounds like a lot, but that check in, that talking to them, that's allowing you to learn from them because they're new. They're going to see things that you don't. It's also allowing them to learn from you, and it's making sure you have the right cultural fit. Because unlike a lot of positions where you might not be the best fit for a job and you might be there 2, 3, 4 years, and that doesn't help anyone. If you meet every week, and you go into the job with the understanding, hey, the first 90 days, this is a probationary period. We need to make sure we all like working together. It may not be a good fit. It may be a great fit. We don't know yet. We got to figure that out. That checkup every week or two is going to make sure that you solidify whether or not that person is a great fit. And it gives both of you a chance to get out before you get in too deep. And I would always much rather give somebody the option to leave and give them a path. Even if it's a, hey, this doesn't seem like a good fit. Yeah, they agree it doesn't seem like a good fit. Okay, let's do this. I'm not going to let you go, but I'm going to give you a month. Stick around here, do your best for the next month. And during that month, go look for another job. When you find another job, leave here, go there. I'm going to start looking for someone to hire and put them in your spot. You don't owe me 2 weeks, but rather than just fire you today, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go find another job before you leave. Now, if somebody's super toxic, that obviously doesn't work. But when it's everybody's good intention and it's just not the best fit, that's a great way to handle it. Now, let's talk a little bit before I let you go today about what this type of hiring and this whole concept we've been talking about today is going to do for your long-term culture. One of the things you always have to remember, good people want to work with good people. When your team starts flagging bad cultural fits, it's time to let those people go. Your team is going to realize that easier than your interview process. That's why you need a probationary period when you bring someone on. And when you have good people working for you, you're going to attract good people. They're going to be the people that are putting in those applications. Your regulars are immediately going to notice when someone is or isn't in your culture. And a floor of people who feel like who like their jobs is different than a floor of people that isn't. It doesn't. And we've all worked with those folks in this industry. I mean, let's be honest, there are a lot of toxic people in the bar business, but you don't have to employ them. You don't have to put up with them. Build a culture, build the team that everyone else on your team loves and that your guests love, because that's how you build sustainability in the long run. Toxicity has no place in your bar. The operators that have the huge high retention rates, they know how to hire and onboard, not just how to pay. I will tell you, my turnover for years at 86th Street Pub was 10, 15%. Some years it was 20, but that's because I only had like 15 people on. 20%, well, yeah, 20% was basically 2 people leave. So that's a little over 20%. So small staff, you might have these higher rates. And a lot of folks I lost because, well, they moved. They had life changes. They had kids and didn't want to work nights anymore. Like all those things that happen in life. And yes, I did make some bad hires and have some people I had to fire. Largely because I'm not doing what we're covering. I didn't do what we covered in this episode. But I will tell you right now, just paying more money is not a retention strategy. Hiring the right people, building a great culture, integrating those people into your culture, and knowing how to hire and onboard is going to do more for your retention than any amount of money ever could. Every great culture and every great team member is going to make finding that next team member easier. Every wrong hire costs you your culture, your customers, and your time. So just remember, folks, your next great bartender is probably out there right now working a job they're overqualified for. Maybe they have no bar experience. Maybe they come from a white collar background. Maybe they come from a blue collar background. But one thing I know they know is how to make strangers feel like regulars. And your hiring process needs to be able to identify that person. So I would urge you, stop filtering for what's on a resume and start filtering for that right cultural fit, that person who walks in to the room for the interview.
That about wraps it up for today. If you're tired of sorting through bar problems by yourself, come join us inside Bar Business Nation. It's our free Facebook group for bar owners and operators talking about what's working, what's not, and how to make the business easier to run. Search Bar Business Nation on Facebook, and I'll talk to you next time.